In his podcast Issues with Same-Sex Marriage on his website reasonablefaith.org, philosopher and Christian apologist William Lane Craig had this to say about the well-being of children raised by same-sex couples.
I was struck by a statement late in the letter where she says, in same-sex headed households, the desires of the adults trump the rights of the child. That's a really interesting way of seeing the issue. And in fact, her experience is not just anecdotal. She does relate her own experience. But Mark Regnerus, who is a professor at UT Austin, has done an extensive study of same-sex couples. And he has shown that the children who are raised in same-sex homes are significantly disadvantaged compared to children who are raised in homes that have a father and a mother. And Regnerus has endured enormous backlash, calls for his dismissal from the University of Texas. He's been denounced as bigoted and homophobic. But in fact, UT Austin reviewed his research methods and upheld their sociological integrity and credibility, and no one has been able to dispute Regnerus's results. So you have here not only the testimony of a woman who is the product of a same-sex family, but you also have sociological data to support the truth of what she's saying. And that's very sobering to me, that the desires of adults should trump the rights of children, that these kids should be disadvantaged by being placed into these homes just because these two people want to have children.
Despite Craig's assertion to the contrary, the new family structure study by Mark Regnerus does not prove that the children of same-sex parents fare worse than those of opposite-sex couples, and I'm going to prove it. I'm going to ignore the controversy mentioned by Craig surrounding the alleged bias of the people who financed and performed the study, for it's unnecessary to make my point. Instead, I will concentrate my criticisms on the study's methodology. First things first, this study screened over 15,000 young adults between the ages of 18 and 39, and ended up surveying 2,988 of them, a sample designed to be representative of the United States. This study aimed to examine the outcomes of respondents who grew up in certain family types and compare them to those of respondents who were raised by their biological mothers and fathers, and these were together all throughout the respondents' childhoods. The types the study used to categorize the respondents' families were originally 8, but for the topic of this video only 3 of them are relevant. 1. Intact biological families where the respondents were raised by their biological mothers and fathers, and these were together all throughout the respondents' childhood. 2. Families where the mother, hence named by the study lesbian mother, had the same-sex romantic relationship at some point during the respondent's childhood. 3. Families where the father, hence named by the study gay father, had the same-sex romantic relationship at some point during the respondent's childhood. The results of the comparisons between the outcomes of the respondents from family type 1 and of those from family types 2 and 3, which showed the former faring better than the latter, have been employed by anti-same-sex marriage activists to support their cause. On this topic, the American Sociological Association was called in by the US Supreme Court on February 28, 2013 to give their opinion on the issue of child raising by same-sex couples, due to the same-sex marriage legal cases that were being scrutinized by the Supreme Court at that time. It is exactly in the brief that the American Sociological Association provided then to the Supreme Court that you can find a thorough rebuttal to the notion that the new family structure study proves that children fare better when raised by opposite-sex couples rather than same-sex couples. Since I can't make any improvement on it by putting it into my words, I'm going to directly read it to you. Quote, "The Regnerus study offers no basis for conclusions about same-sex parents. First, the Regnerus study does not specifically examine children born or adopted into same-sex parent families, but instead examines children who, from the time they were born until they were 18 or moved out, had a parent who, at any time, had a same-sex romantic relationship. As Regnerus noted, the majority of the individuals characterized by him as children of lesbian mothers and gay fathers were the offspring of failed opposite-sex unions whose parents subsequently had a same-sex relationship. In other words, Regnerus did not study or analyze the children of two same-sex parents. Second, when the Regnerus study compared the children of parents who at one point had a same-sex romantic relationship, most of whom had experienced a family dissolution or single motherhood, to children raised by two biological married opposite-sex parents, the study stripped away all divorced, single, and step-parent families from the opposite-sex group, leaving only stable, married, opposite-sex families as the comparison. Thus, it was hardly surprising that the opposite-sex group had better outcomes given that stability is a key predictor of positive child well-being. By so doing, the Regnerus study makes inappropriate apples-to-oranges comparisons. Third, Regnerus' first published analysis of his research data failed to consider whether the children lived with, or were raised by, the parent who was, at some point, apparently involved in a romantic relationship with someone of the same sex and that same-sex partner. Instead, Regnerus categorized children as raised by a parent in a same-sex romantic relationship, regardless of whether they were in fact raised by the parent and the parent's same-sex romantic partner, and regardless of the amount of time that they spent under the parent's care. As a result, so long as an adult child believed that he or she had had a parent who had a relationship with someone of the same sex, then he or she was counted by Regnerus as having been raised by a parent in a same-sex relationship. Finally, the study fails to account for the fact that the negative outcomes may have been caused by other childhood events or events later in the individual's adult life, particularly given that the vast majority of the outcomes measured were adult and not childhood outcomes. Factors other than same-sex parenting are likely to explain these negative outcomes in the Regnerus study. Regnerus himself concludes that, quote, "I am thus not suggesting that growing up with a lesbian mother or gay father causes suboptimal outcomes because of the sexual orientation or sexual behavior of the parent," end quote. In sum, by conflating children raised by same-sex parents with individuals who reportedly had a parent who had a romantic relationship with someone of the same sex, and referring to such individuals as children of lesbian mothers or gay fathers, the Regnerus study obscures the fact that it did not specifically examine children raised by two same-sex parents. Accordingly, it cannot speak to the impact of same-sex parenting on child outcomes, end quote. I believe what I've just shown you proves what I said before. In spite of what Craig might assert, the new family structure study does not show that the children of same-sex parents fare significantly worse compared to those raised by opposite-sex couples.